We're going to talk about some of the lost landscapes and the hidden legacy in the northeast backwoods, and we're going to look at some sites that are cairns and chambers, megaliths, and some effigies. And I read the book Manitou many years ago. It was published in 1989 by James Maver and Byron Dix, and these guys went a long ways towards proving that the natives in the Northeast did in fact build in stone, and in many cases aligned their constructions with astronomical events on the horizon. And they were no lightweights. Byron Dix was a optical engineer, an optics engineer, and James Maver was a naval architect at Woods Hole, and was one of the co-developers of the Alvin submersible submarine, and he also was involved with the excavations in the Eastern Mediterranean of Santorini in the late 60s that was associated with Atlantis. And I had bought a copy of Ignatius Donnelly's book, Atlantis, and luckily enough, inside the front cover were some original articles from the 1967 New York Times article on the find. And there's Maver pictured directing the excavations in the Mediterranean on Santorini. So these guys really had a lot to do with kind of, I would say a lot of my research is built on theirs, and the case is still trying to be made that the natives did do this. It's not, it's really not taken for granted that the Native Americans in the Northeast built in stone or did astronomical observation, even though it is taken for granted in almost every other part of America, Central, the Southwest, certainly South American ancient cultures all had a tradition of doing this. And it's really selling the Northeast native civilization short to say that they did not. So I started looking at sites and investigating sites similar to the ones that Byron Dix and James Maver did in New England, here in the Hudson Valley, and found what I believe to be quite a few sites that fall into the category that possibly could be Native American. And I made a database of these sites so you could sort them and filter them and look for certain patterns, concentrations, distributions that help us understand. And these are the names of some of the sites. We're not going to be able to look at them all today. We have 7 Cairn sites. I think it's kind of interesting to note that the Cairn sites fall more in the mountains, and the perched rocks and standing stoles and dolmens usually are on ridge tops or mountain tops, higher locations. And then we also have alignments and some chambers that we're going to take a look at. And as I said, we can't really look at all of them because it would take too long, but kind of this will be a tour of some of my favorite sites that I've been researching. We're going to start with the Mink Hollow Cairn Fields in Lake Hill, New York, and they are located right on the Ulster-Greene County line. The site consists of 2 separate cairn complexes, each with a few dozen low circular cairns, about 2 meters across and 1 meter high, very uniform, scattered over a sloping area of upland forest just north of the headwaters of the Beaverkill Creek. And we'll see a lot of these sites are associated with headwaters of tributaries to major rivers and also natural spring locations. So there are cairns here and stone walls, and this is a location of where it is in Lake Hill, right here near the Ulster-Greene County line, in the town of Woodstock, which is my hometown. A near member named Don Rue, an elderly, very tall gentleman who I met at an early New York conference, gave me a map of Mink Hollow when he heard I had been researching there, and this is the map he created of the Cairn Fields and the stone walls up there. And after several trips up into Mink Hollow, eventually I did find everything on this map, and it was quite interesting to see how it lined up with some of the things that I had done. This was an early drawing I had done of the Mink Hollow Cairn Field and one of the walls there that runs about 250 feet and then has a bend in it. And this is a cross-section of this wall. You'll see pictures of it. It's straight up on one side and sloping down on the opposite side, and the land actually comes right up to the top here. So it's kind of a little bit unusual. We're going to just start looking at some of the pictures of the cairns, and there's a lot of them, and to some, they're just piles of stone. And to me, they're a little more interesting than that. And they seem to be in rows. They seem to be very well formed, very purposeful, which is typical of cairns that are built as part of a belief system. And I think it's also important to mention that while these sites currently kind of fall between the cracks of archaeology and anthropology, They are beginning to get noticed, and there is a site in Turners Falls, Massachusetts. The airport there was looking to extend its runway, and at the end of the runway were some stone walls and some stone mounds, probably similar to this. Here's a stone wall that leads to a large boulder with a pile of stones stacked upon it, perhaps a serpent or snake effigy. And the Turners Falls site, you know, colonial stone walls and constructions are pretty much a dime a dozen in the Northeast. Everybody just assumes everything is that. But what made the Turners Falls site a little bit different was that the Native American tribes themselves came forward when they saw that the site was endangered by the construction project on the runway. And they really, I guess, decided amongst themselves to share with the people who were about to destroy the site that it was something very special to them and sacred and ceremonial. And that is the first site, and because the tribal preservation officers, I believe it was the Narragansett and Mashpee and the Wampanoag tribes, and Doug Harris, who was one of the tribal preservation officers who brought this to the attention of the authorities and said, no, these are our constructions and we do want them protected, got them listed and protected, and they are the first sites in the Northeast that are considered to be and recognized by the federal government as a Native American lithic ceremonial sacred site in the Northeast. So that really set a precedent and in some way opened the door for looking at what these other sites might be and if they fall into the same category. So again, we're looking at a wall here that seems to point to a low spot in the on the horizon there. And if we were to put our compass on that, I'm not sure if I have a compass shot of that one, but it is pointing towards the southeast where the winter solstice sun would probably appear coming over that mountain on the shortest day of the year, December 21st. There's another view of one of the walls up there, quite tall on this side, sloping down on that side. This is actually the land that rises right up to the top of the wall. Quite unusual. Here you can see it. And you don't typically see walls like this. Here's a portion of the wall that's running dead north-south. And you know, looking in the historical records, you don't find any land boundaries or surveys that show this as being a property boundary or part of a farm homestead or something like that. It just doesn't fall into that category. And many of these sites, through research and through the process of elimination, are not found to be what these sites are typically attributed to, which is either quarrying or agricultural activity or farm beautification. So these fall into a slightly different category. The Bearsville Hollow cairns, and notice a lot of these are located in hollows. We had Mink Hollow, now we have Bearsville Hollow, we'll have Lewis Hollow later. And I think the geography of hollows speaks to a place where energy may accumulate. They're heads of valleys, they're circular, in ways they're almost like natural henges, and we'll talk maybe a little more about that later. So up in Bearsville we have a few dozen medium-sized cairns. These are a little larger than the ones in Mink Hollow. Again, they're in the neighborhood of 2 meters across and 1.5 meters high, although some are larger. And some you'll see may appear to have a turtle form. And there's also a large turtle-shaped boulder in the middle of this complex, which I think is very telling, since of course we know that the turtle played very strongly into Native American creation myth, and that's almost universal across the U.S. So here's one of the cairns there, and we did a site visit here with NERA at the Kingston conference a few years ago, so some NERA folks have actually come and visited this site. I'm just going to kind of move through here so you can see what these sites look like, and towards the end you're going to start seeing ones that look a little more like turtles. This one, you know, if this was a head and you had a paw here and a paw here, it's almost beginning to have a turtle aspect. Many of these sites have been dug into. You can see that they've, over the years, somebody has looked and tried to discover its secrets or find out if there's something hidden inside it, maybe a cyst or a chamber, or maybe they just collapsed over time.